Hello everyone, my name is Ollie, welcome back. Today we're going to be expanding on our last video, which we created a organized chest, and that included us creating a custom block state, which allows us to open up a custom menu when we interact with this chest. This video, we're going to add the custom interaction. So this chest currently comes with the default F to interact, which opens the menu, and then left click, which actually breaks the chest. But what we want to add is an interaction to set the filter for this chest. So my idea is whenever someone wants to set a filter, they should right click the chest with iron ore, and it should pop up some type of filter configuration for them, maybe like a UI. In this video, we're not going to go over custom UIs. That's going to be in the next video, which will be up on January 23rd at 12 p.m. PST. All right, let's open up our IntelliJ project from last video and get into the coding. If you remember from last video, we created a filter chest state that extends item container state, which is a state created by Hytale. We created this method, set up row filters, and we created this filter data inner class. Before we move on, I want to go over a quick edge case that I found while testing this plugin. Sometimes this could throw an index out of bounds exception if we're not careful, because the row could exceed the amount of items in IDs. So we're going to fix that really quick. Here, filter data.ids, I'm going to do Control-Alt-V and go down to the second option. And now I'm going to do if row is less than IDs.length. And I'm going to negate this, and I'm going to break. So here, if the row number is not less than IDs.length, then we break. The reason is the row is 0 index, the length is not 0 index. So let's say we had an array here, and we have ore and dirt. The length here equals 2. Rows 0 and 1. At max, our greatest row is always going to be less than IDs.length. Going back to our main class, we also registered our custom block state here, and this allowed us to attach our block state by this ID to any block we wanted. Then in resources server/items/items, we created this filter chest.json, and we assigned it this custom filter chest state that we created. We also defined the capacity of 54 to get this big UI inventory. Before we leave this file, I'm going to do Control-Shift-, which collapses all the values here, and then I'm going to press on it again, and then it'll give me this neat view of everything. And I'm going to open up the block type, look for interactions, which would be on line 62 if you copied my file. Open that up, and here we can see what interactions are currently linked to our custom block. And since last video, we created a custom state and put the ID here under state, this video, we're going to create a custom interaction and put the ID here under interactions. So first, you're going to want to right click your main package, new package interactions, then right click interactions, new Java class, chest filter, configure chest filter interaction. Kind of a long name. You don't have to make it this long. You can make it whatever you want. So the first step to creating our custom interaction is extends simple interaction. And there are multiple types of interaction classes. This simple interaction class just implements the things that we don't really need to worry about and allows us to add our own custom interaction logic by overriding the tick0 method. If you want to see all the different types of interactions, I recommend control clicking on simple interaction and go to this select open file and click on it. If you followed my first tutorial, this should open up the Hytale server jar, and here it'll select the actual interaction class that you're viewing right now. But you can also see all the other interactions that are implemented here. So for example, if we open up server and look here, we'll see there are many different types of interactions, like this launchpad interaction, interact with block, launches the player. This is a good way to not only discover new states that you can play around with and implement into your code or reuse, but also it allows you to see how the Hytale devs use this code themselves so you can use it in your own implementations. For now, all we need is a simple interaction. First, I'm going to make this look a little better. So I'm going to put a space here. Next, for my interaction, I'm going to ignore this super.tick. The super.tick has this fail state here. You can look into it if you want. I'm not sure that we need it for this interaction though. So first, we need to start by getting our player. For me, I'm going to use the player to send them a message later, but also to get the world. So what I'm going to do is context.get owning entity. This owning entity is the entity who triggered the interaction. So if a player triggers the interaction, it'll correspond to them. Next, I'm going to do owning entity.getStore, and this is going to be our entity store. Then we're going to do store.getComponent. If you're confused by this, be sure to watch my first and second videos of this series. They kind of go into this a little bit more in depth. Since this simple interaction doesn't have a query method like our event system, we should double check if our player is valid. So we're going to do if player equals null, return. And I'm going to group these together. Next, we're going to get the world from the player, player.getWorld. And we're going to do Control-V to get the world variable. Then we're going to do if world equals null, then return. Just to make sure the world is valid. I don't really see a case where player.getWorld would return null if they triggered an interaction in that world. But I do this mostly because my IDE will throw a warning if I don't. Next, we're going to get the target block from the context. The target block is the block that the interaction was triggered on. And this can very well be null because sometimes you're just interacting with error. So we're going to do context.getTargetBlock, Control-Alt-V, and then if target block equals null, then return. Next, we're going to get the item in the player's hand. So we're going to do context.getHeldItem. Then Control-Alt-V again, we have the held item. And let's make sure the item isn't null because a player could very well be holding nothing. Next, let's check if the item is the proper interaction item. You could very well use our config example from last time to define an interaction item here that your users can change later on, but I'm going to hard code it to challenge you guys to implement it on your own. If you have any questions, join the Discord and I'll try to answer them to the best of my abilities. But we also have a few other people in there who have been very active with answering questions and giving help. So we're going to do if not held item dot get item dot get ID dot equals ignore case or underscore iron, then return. So if we get the ID from the item and that ID doesn't equal or underscore iron, then we return, which means we do nothing. And here's another opportunity to add something to your config. I'm going to do int required amount. I'm going to set this required amount to 1. You can set it to whatever you want, but I recommend putting it in the config file and passing in that variable here instead. Next, we're going to do player.getInventory.getHotbar.remove item stack from slot. Our slot is going to be our context.getHeldItem slot. Then we're going to pass in the quantity to remove, which is the required amount. Then we're going to pass in true for all or nothing, then pass in false for filter. First of all, this all or nothing variable will fail if the player doesn't have the required amount. Next, this filter variable will fail if the inventory you're trying to remove from doesn't allow removal. Next, we're going to press at the end of this line, do Control-Alt-V, and we're going to get an item stack slot transaction type object. I'm going to clean this up a little. Now, if the player doesn't have enough items in their inventory, or for some reason the code couldn't remove these 2 items, so we're going to do if item stack slot transaction succeeded, return, and we're going to negate this. So if not, item stack slot transaction has succeeded, then we're going to return. If it does succeed, then we're going to run our code here. What we want to do is give the user the option to apply their filter to this chest. We need to get the block state of the interacted block to make sure it's of type filter chest state. So to do that, first we need to do block module dot get block entity. Then we're going to pass in the world, and we're going to pass in int x, y, and z. This is the position of the block, so we're going to do target block dot x, target block dot y, and target block dot z. Then we're going to do Control-Alt-V and get the block entity for our target block. Then we're going to do block entity.getStore, Control-Alt-V, block chunk store. And now we can finally get our block state. So we're going to do block state.getBlockState, and we need to pass in our block entity. Then we need to pass in the component accessor, which can be the chunk store. Then do Control-V one more time, and now we finally have our block state for the target block. If you guys know a better way of doing this, please let me know. I'm not sure if it's very good practice to access the block state directly from the chunk store. Now we're going to check if the block state of the current block is our block state. So we're going to do if not block state instance of filter chest state return. So this is called pattern matching. Pretty much it's going to automatically cast this variable to filter chest state if our block state is of type filter chest state. So if our block state of the block that we interacted with is not filter chest state, then we return. Otherwise, we get access to our filter chest state class, and we can finally access our setup row filters method that we created in the last video. So now the pieces kind of come together. Here we can pass in a new filter data into our setup row filters. And we can do this in multiple ways. One way is by opening a UI to the user and asking them to enter their filter, then passing that into the setup row filters method. But in this video, we're not going to go over custom UI, so I'm just going to hard code it. And in the next video, I'll show you how to let the user control what filter they have on their chest. So first of all, we're going to do new filter data. And I'm actually going to go back to this constructor and change it to string ... IDs. This is kind of a cool trick. This also means string array, but it allows you to pass in the array in the parameters. If that doesn't make sense to you, pretty much it allows you to put strings directly in the parameters here instead of having to initialize a new array. For me today, I'm just going to make our first row take in ore, our second row take in stone, our third row take in soil, and our last row take in leather. Next, we're going to do Control-Alt-V, and now we have our filter data. After that, we can finally call our method. So we're going to do filter chest state setup row filters filter data. Then we're going to send a message to the player just as a sanity check and kind of as a cool effect to let them know that their filter has been applied. So we're going to do message.raw successfully updated chest filter options. And I'm going to make this a cool color like color dot. I'm going to do green. Also, I want to make this bold. So now let's recap. This tick0 method gets called when a user does any type of interaction. If you want to find out interaction types, you can control click on this interaction type enum right here, and it'll show you all the different interaction types in the game. So let's run through it from the top. Here, we're getting the player. And again, if you're confused by this, please take a look at my first and second videos. Here, we're getting the world the player is currently in. And here, we're getting the target block, which is the block that was interacted with. If there was no block that was interacted with, then this will return null. Then we're getting the item in the player's hand. We're checking if it's null, and we're checking if it equals iron ore or not. If it's iron ore, then we continue. Here, we're taking the item out of the player's inventory. Up here, if the player doesn't have the item, we'll return. Over here, if the player doesn't have enough of the item or their inventory doesn't allow taking things out for some reason, then we're going to return and not run the code below. Here, we're getting the block entity and the chunk store to access the block state for our block. Again, we created a custom block state, so here we're checking if that block state matches our custom block state. At this point, you might be thinking, why do we check if the block state equals filter chest state if we're going to directly link this interaction to our custom item? And you're right about that. Since we control this custom interaction, we can apply it to whatever item or block we want. So we don't need this line to filter it, but we do need to access the filter chest state class to run this setup row filters method. So that's why we're doing this in the first place. So if the block state that was interacted with is of type filter chest state, which is our own custom block state, then we're going to create new filter data, and we're going to add in some random types like ore, stone, soil, and leather. Next, we're going to call our method with our filter data that we just created. And lastly, we're going to send the user a message that their filter options have been applied. So now we're almost done with this class, but I'm going to do a couple things before we leave it. I'm going to do suppress warnings and do removal just to get rid of these annoying red underlines that were here under block state. Next, I'm going to do public static final. And let's hope by this point you're guessing that we need a codec. So we're going to do builder codec of type configure chest filter interaction, which is honestly too long of a name. You can make your own name. I'm going to do codec for the variable name, and I'm going to do builder codec.builder, pass in the configure chest filter interaction class, and the supplier for this class, configure chest filter interaction new. And lastly, we're going to pass in the base codec from the simple interaction. So we're going to do simple interaction.codec. And this is going to be our parent codec for this builder. And don't forget to do .build. So now we have our codec, we have our actual interaction code here. And lastly, for the Java coding part, we're going to need to register this interaction by an ID so that we can reference it in our custom block, just like we referenced our state. So we're going to go to our main class, make some space, and type this.getCodecRegistry interaction.codec.register configure chest filter interaction.class and configure chest filter interaction.codec. Good job, everyone. You officially coded your first interaction. Now we need the server to recognize our interaction as a custom interaction type. So I'm going to go to our resources. Next, we're going to right-click server.item.items, hit new directory root interactions. Then we're going to right-click on root interactions, refactor, move directory, and delete this items and the slash. This is because the root interaction belongs under server.item, not server.item.items. Then we're going to right-click our root interactions, new file, and type configure chest filter.json. Then here we're going to do curly braces, interactions, bracket, and then we're going to get our ID that we created here, which is configured chest filter, paste it in here. Then we're going to put a comma here and require new click, and I'm going to set this to true. The require new click option basically prevents people from holding down the interaction button and spamming your interaction. So this prevents accidental interactions, but also prevents some spam. One more step we need to do is right click server.item, new directory interactions, right click interactions, new file, configure chest filter.json. And here we're going to start with curly braces, hit enter, quotation marks, type, and we're going to put configure chest filter. This is the ID that we defined here. Here we can even add cool things like effects, but I'm not going to go over that in this video. Lastly, and most importantly, we're going to assign our filter chest our custom interaction. So we're going to go back to line 63. We're going to hit enter, type secondary, colon, and type in our interaction ID, which is configured chest filter. So now every time someone uses their secondary button on our chest, then it's going to run the configured chest filter interaction. Lastly, what we're going to do is build a project. So now we can log back in, make sure we place one of our chests, and hold some iron in our hand, walk up to our chest and right click it. And you can see here it says successfully updated chest filter options, and it took 2 iron from my inventory. If I, let's say, only have 1 iron and right click it here, nothing will happen. Now the moment of truth, let's test out our chest. We're going to get some stone. We already have some ore. We're going to get some soil, and we're going to get some leather, medium leather. Open this chest up and just control click everything in here. So now we can see the filter in action. When I shift click them, everything went to the proper slot, so I didn't have to go in and put it in manually. And you can see here every other slot is actually unfiltered, so we can use them for anything else we wanted. Thank you guys for watching another tutorial video. I hope this one was helpful to you guys too. And be sure to come back for the next video where we're going to tie it all together and let the user customize their experience by adding their own filters to the chest. Don't forget to join the Discord if you want help, or if you want to show off your creations, or maybe help some other people. Again, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the support, the likes, and the comments. They really keep me wanting to make more videos to help you guys out. And remember, I'm learning just as much as you guys while creating these videos for you, so please be patient with me while I upload new videos.